to provide 5 lakh women, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, term loans up to 2 crores during the next 5 years. The scheme is meant to incorporate lessons from the successful Stand Up India scheme. Online capacity building for entrepreneurship and managerial skills will also be organized. So with that as a starting point, let me turn first to Mr. Rao. Mr. Rao, if you can give us your perspectives on how should the credit card for micro enterprises, credit schemes for MSMEs and startups, how should they be scaled up? In particular, how to make this interface between startups and MSMEs and the formal banking sector and credit sector more streamlined. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Thank you for the opportunity. Just to give a big picture, let me tell you the banking ecosystem, how it works as far as these startups and also these credit cards for the micro enterprises are concerned. First one is on the acquisition, that is the identification of the target group, whether it is the startup or the women beneficiaries or the people who require the working capital of the micro enterprises. So once that identification is the first part, then it goes to the assessment. Assessment right now, for the past, if you see the past 2-3 years, there is a lot of change in the assessment as far as banks are concerned. Because the assessment earlier was a traditional model where that, a lot of paperwork that was involved and then documented income and also the sources that were also recorded. But now because of the digital age, there is the alternate credit assessment models that has come up, and all the banks have also adopted where surrogate methods of assessment has come into play, including the cash flow based assessments. So in the assessment part, now almost all the banks are on the same page and there is no deviation, and then all the banks are not relying on the traditional models as far as this particular segment of customers are concerned. Next is the delivery part. How the delivery happens. In that, where it comes in the grounding of the units and also the activity which has to be taken up. Subsequently, cash flow monitoring, what it has to be. And in between, you have the marketing of the products. In the entire spectrum, from the identification to the cash flow monitoring, that's what the amount comes back to the bank for the recycle of funds. In the entire spectrum, the first one is on the startup side, because it is the ideas which are being funded for the gaps that we find out in the economy and also activity, which gives a lot of positiveness. So as far as the banks are concerned, from the IBA side, a working group is already established and a lot of work has gone into. In the first quarter of the next financial year, that web portal will be operationalized, where end-to-end requirement of the startups will be taken up. So here, from the identification part, the credit assessment part, and also delivery of the credit, everything is interlinked, and this portal serves as for the startup ecosystem portal from the IBA side, where all the banks are members. So that is for the startups. Coming to the credit card, that is for the 5 lakhs. In many of the micro enterprises, we find that it is not just the term loan that is more important to create the asset, but running the activity, certain kind of working capital that is required. The design that is made for the credit card is much more sufficient for these micro enterprises to cater to their working capital requirements. And I think SIDBI is rolling out this particular product, and this will be much more useful for the micro enterprises for their success. And these are all the two things as the initial thoughts just I am sharing with you, and going ahead we will give our input. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. And just in terms of format, for everyone who's attending the session, we will do 2 rounds of Q&A and somewhat interactively. I will request other panelists to also add their comments as we go along. And then we will open it up for further suggestions, questions to the other participants. So moving on from Mr. Rao, but continuing with the theme of credit and making credit accessible in a simpler way, and recognizing the challenges also of formal credit underwriting, can I turn to Mr. Hitesh Sachdev from ICICI? Hitesh, with your hat on, how do you see different ways of using data, underwriting credit, making the process easier and faster to make these very attractive loan opportunities accessible both to micro enterprises, small enterprises, as well as startups? What can be done to make it easier, faster, better, and keep good, robust credit quality?
Thanks, Anjali. As far as MSMEs are concerned, one of the biggest challenge for the lenders have been underwriting the risk in the MSME segment. And hitherto, lenders have been using methods like balance sheet and P&L account assessment and offering credit. However, with a lot of digital data available in today's time, we have independent, neutral, and unbiased data sources available like GSTN data, account aggregation data. We have, GEM portal. So many such digital footprints are available about MSMEs. And if we can combine all this digital data and create a scoring methodology wherein we can imagine an alternate bureau where all these data sets can be scored and the scoring can be made available to the lenders. That will ease out the flow of credit to the MSMEs in a big way. Uh, Apart from that, the form factor of the credit card can be also a credit line on UPI, which can enable its usage at multiple places. And apart from that, we can also create reward mechanisms for the credit cards for MSMEs where the timely repayments can be incentivized by way of lower interest rates or the benefits for certain payments linked to their businesses. And the last point I would like to make about is how do we enable MSMEs to conduct their business operations efficiently by providing them various digital tools. So while MSMEs struggle in their accounting, managing their compliances, and some of them are also wanting to do online business, uh, how do we provide digital tools along with such great offerings which can help them in easing out their business operations, and that can be a big enabler in their growth journey.
Thank you, Hitesh. I will come back on this question of credit because there is a balance on good quality of credit and yet making it accessible. So, Mr. Rao and Hitesh, I will come back to you. But I'm moving next to startups. I think we saw over the last 10 years the growth of the AIF ecosystem in India. And again, very innovative policy formulation from our government, big support for startups. We now have more than 150,000, so close to 2 lakh registered startups. Most of them, of course, are also MSMEs. And we are seeing tremendous economic outcomes on the one hand with wealth creation, value creation, but also strategic outcomes like innovation. So indigenous innovation coming through in India. If the last 10 years was about digitization, would we say the next 10 years has to be around manufacturing, green manufacturing, precision manufacturing, creating indigenous technology that makes us truly self-reliant in critical areas like energy, agriculture, food systems, new materials. So on that note, I'm going to turn to Dr. Arvind Gupta. Arvindji, you have been involved with the Fund of Fund for Startups. You've seen many things that have worked, some things that can probably be done differently. And so my first question to you is, please comment on what has worked, what should we do more of, what do we need to change, and how do we grow this? So what was 10,000 crores? How does this become 100,000 crores? From one fund of funds, how do we go to 10 fund of funds in India? Over to you.
So thank you, Anjali ji, for starting initiating this discussion, and all the organizers. Thank you for organizing this. I don't want to name everybody in the interest of time. Uh, let's converge. The Prime Minister talked about the whole of government approach, participative governance, and the fact that MSMEs, women-led businesses, and of course startups have been the backbone of India's growth story. They need to prosper for India to prosper and achieve the Viksit Bharat goals. As you know, so that's the reason I will comment upon all these three aspects from the question that you asked me. Number one, Startup India as a program was launched on January 16th, 2016. Now, what that is important is it changed the 4 M's required for startups to succeed. Number one was the mindset, the policy mindset, the mindset of the government that startups are important. And that percolated down to startups, to entrepreneurs, to innovators, to young future entrepreneurs at that stage who are now unicorns perhaps. So the first change was the first time the mindset change. The second was the government opened up its own market, the government e-marketplace, its own procurement policies for startups to sell to the government. And right now, about 20% of government procurement happens via startups. And three, we basically launched the third aspect, which was putting a lot of patient capital in India's national priorities, which is the fund of funds scheme. And I'll talk about a deep dive into that. But lastly, the PM even today mentioned the need for mentorship, the need to create those mentors, those for the next set of entrepreneurs, the next set of MSME. So this was the 4M formula, in my opinion, that was applied when Startup India was launched. One of the most aspect, and all of them are very important, including the ability to sell to the government, providing mentorship, because no amount of good money can solve for lack of capability and capacity, and the policy and mindset change. But going deep into the money, which is the fund of funds scheme that we talked about, I think that was revolutionary because India, we are unlike other nations. We had to invest our own very, very important capital into a fund structure, which was not only just a fund to the domestic venture capital funds and AIFs, but also acted as a multiplier, as a signaling mechanism that the global funds get aggregated around these domestic AIFs in India. And as previous participants and others who will follow will talk about, a couple of things have happened. Actually, many things have happened. Number one, we've got about 90,000 crore rupees, 91,000 crore rupees to be precise, aggregated by the 150 plus funds that the SIDBI scheme alone has supported. But the two very important things that have come about because of that is that we have been able to fund, these funds have been able to fund national priorities that probably would have missed out if they didn't have access to this capital. Things like, 10 years ago, agriculture, agri-tech, space tech, B2B manufacturing, recycling of critical minerals, AI-based cancer screening. So a lot of areas which required a lot of long-term capital. Two, I always mention, this has become a very federal cooperative example, because in the federalism, you have participation from states now. And the SIDBI Fund of Fund is not only taking the 10,000 crores, but it also has taken money and co-invested along with the Odisha, the Bihar ecosystem, the UP ecosystem, and has invested into areas where generally venture capital was not prospering. Things in Northeast, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, and all the areas of India. So Jammu and Kashmir. So the point being that not only it provided the money, but provided the geographical diversity. And of course, 51% of startups that have come about of the 165,000 startup are tier 2, tier 3 startup. 50% of them are led by women. So you see how the whole of government approach, how a holistic thinking, taking India first has worked. When we go to the second round, I can comment on how we need to think about expanding this for when we come to the fund of fund 2.0, which is the next, which is what has been announced in this budget, and what are the lessons that we can draw upon. But the success is stupendous. It is success of the industry. And I know we have an industry representative present here today, and success of the policymakers to everybody in between. So thank you.
Arvindji, thank you. This was very helpful background context, and it's very nice to pause for a minute and actually reflect on the tremendous success of the first round of this program and to see what next can be done. I'm going to turn to Sanjeev Bikhchandani. Sanjeev, if I may say, you are one of the OGs of the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, a role model for many. And you've both been an entrepreneur as well as an investor, and you continue to mentor a number of startups. So over to you on where do you see some of the highlights of the recent budget announcements? What can be done to make them most effective? And why is this important? Over to you. Do we have Mr. Bikhchandani? Okay, we will wait for him to rejoin.
Sorry, I'm here. I was on mute. Sorry. No, I think the biggest contribution that this government has made in the last 10 years, it's got several contributions for entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurship, for startups. But the biggest one is what you spoke about and Arvind spoke about, which is a fund of funds for startups. So I was in the first investment committee for the first 2 years. I was in the first two investment committees for this fund of funds. And initially, I must say, it was, we were treading new ground and I was a little skeptical. But actually, as things, panned out and went forward, so it's like this. Startups need risk capital. Risk capital is equity capital from angels, from venture funds, usually. It's not bank loans because loans have to be repaid. Loans have guarantees. Loans have often a collateral, right? Loans you escrow your receivables. So you actually need equity capital as risk capital. So the entrepreneur taking a risk and the venture capitalist takes a risk along with the entrepreneur. So either they both win together or they both lose money together. Okay. Now, India has had risk capital for the last 20, 30 years, 20, 25 years. Right? But the bulk of it has been risk capital from overseas. And even if you floated a venture fund in India, your LPs, your limited partners, the people who gave you the money as a venture capitalist, would usually be from overseas. Now, there's nothing wrong with overseas capital. It's just that it dries up when things get tough. And I have personally experienced this. In the 2000 meltdown, dot-com meltdown, venture capital had only just begun to come into India, but immediately with that meltdown, venture capital disappeared. And there was a drought of venture capital for the next 5 years. So I remember a number of startups went under. They could not raise the next round. A number who were trying to come up could not raise money. We barely survived. So what you want is Indian sources of risk capital. Now, historically, India has not had risk capital as an asset class in significant amounts, barring a few. So in order to kickstart and jumpstart it, the moment the government, through SIDBI, says, here, we are putting in 20% of the fund, it gives a lot of confidence to others. As Indian startups succeed and their investors make money, an example is set for other Indian, HNIs and family offices and other Indian institutions to put a portion of their asset portfolio towards venture capital funds. But really, it is the bedrock that the government provides, the anchor, being the anchor investor that the government provides, that gives others the confidence. And of course, there are role models and case studies. I think, as a company, InfoEdge, my company, where I work, invested early in Zomato and Policy Bazaar, and that turned out really well. And that has become an example of how Indians and Indian companies and Indian family offices can allocate a portion of their portfolio towards risk capital. And, without risk capital, it's hard for first generation entrepreneurs, for early stage startups to succeed. So it can be done, but it's hard. But no, so Anjali, I began my working career in 1984. That's about 40 years ago. And between then and now, if I look back, there has been a sea change in the Indian business environment. India has always been an entrepreneurial country, always. But in the absence of availability of risk capital, entrepreneurship was perhaps limited to people who are already in business and their families, people from certain castes and communities, and from certain regions of India. What has happened now with the availability of risk capital, availability of venture capital, a new kind of entrepreneur is being supported. These are entrepreneurs who are not from business families. These are entrepreneurs who are well educated and would have otherwise taken up lucrative careers in the corporate sector. Many of them are breaking out, and they are highly, highly educated and bright. So you have a different class of entrepreneur, different type of entrepreneur emerging, being backed by venture capital. And this venture capital, very often has got government of India money in those funds gotten by SIDBI. So what has happened in the last 10 years is that the domestic venture capital industry in India, which was really very small and nascent, has suddenly blossomed. 10 years. 10 years is not long. 10 years is not long. It's a very short span. It's just one fund. The life of one VC fund is 8 to 10 years. So it's just one fund. Okay, and it's been done in 10 years. And more needs to be done. And I'm glad to see another 10,000 crores is coming. And, and we actually need to do more of it. Now, I'm not asking for making 20,000 crores, but I'm just asking the money that comes back from the first fund of funds, perhaps that should be recycled and replowed back into more venture capital funds. So actually, it is more than 10,000 crores because that money will also come back. So I think India can go scale here. 10,000 crores is just a start. I'll stop here.
Well said, Sanjeev. I'll come back to you on how to scale. I'm going to turn next to Rajat. Rajat Tandon from IBCA represents the whole of industry. Rajat, 3 specific things. One is 10,000 crores. How does it get to 100,000 crores? I'm just making up a number. There are several fund of funds that are now working in India. Of course, SIDBI was the pioneer in that. How do we scale that up? What are you hearing from industry, both in terms of positive responses to the budget, but also what our industry asks? And you represent the entire spectrum of both domestic AIFs as well as other alternative assets, and through them, the whole spectrum of startups and MSMEs as well. Rajat, to you.
Great. Thank you, Anjali. Firstly, let me just start saying, gratitude. That's what we can say. This budget's been phenomenal. As all of us talked about, that this asset class or the investments is probably a decade old. Just to give you some figures, because the industry loves certain numbers, in this last 10 years, close to $430 billion has been invested, which is approximately about 35 lakh crores of both domestic and international money. Up till now, it is now, earlier I would say it was about 95% was international. Today it's come down to about 85-87% to be international. So domestic money, pools of capital are coming in, but the quantum is the momentum has started, and I think it's got to grow. Also, just to let you know, out of this 35 lakh crores, about 27% of the money has gone into startups. This is from the PE, VC, AIF, and the alternate asset, as we call it. 29% has gone into the scale up or the growth entrepreneurs. 30% into real estate and infrastructure. That's approximately a good split of where the money is going. And in terms of, we are returning, this asset class is also returning the money. In 10 years, it's returned close to about 121 billion, about 15 lakh crores has been returned. Interestingly, you'll find that nearly about, as far as members of IVC, we've seen about 15% are women fund managers. So that's good. 10% of all these investments have gone into tier 2 and tier 3. We've created 100+ unicorns. And probably the new terminology, some people, was used the same from unicorns to performicons. So we're getting a lot of performance-based companies as well, who are doing extremely well through IPOs. Now, really, we're thankful to the government for their supportive schemes. The Honorable Finance Minister's budget announcement, which was 2023, about blended finance for sunrise sectors. Now, as Sanjeev mentioned, sunrise sectors are extremely important. Defense, AI, space, climate, green, agri, food, semiconductors. These are some of the areas which the startups definitely take a little bit of a longer time gestation period to come to market. So the fund of fund structures or stroke the blended finance is key. Now, globally, there are about 450+ fund of fund structures, and the US alone, it's about 186. when we talk about India, certainly one of the SIDBI fund of funds, which we're all grateful to, because it has led to creating a, giving money to 141 fund managers who they have, through the stringent process of doing due diligence, have invested money into. Trusted money has been put there. And I think it's been last 7-8 years that the returns have also been phenomenal. The 10,000 crore which was put in is today equivalent to 100,000 crores, 1 lakh crores, which is fantastic in such a short period of time. NIF is a great example. Swami, SRI for MSME funds. These are some good structures. NABARD put up the agri fund of funds. So the sunrise sector today actually heavily depends on some of the alternate funds for innovation, development, and growth. And really, I think we all know this big message saying the trust is developing in this asset class. जैसे mutual fund सही है, वैसे I think विकसित भारत के लिए I would say our self-employed or स्वतंत्र entrepreneurs के लिए fund of funds जिसके अंदर जो AIFs में लगाएं भी बहुत जरूरी है. And probably, other than the government putting in money as well as certain PSUs putting in money, probably it's time to look at even a retail type of investors to be allowed to participate in fund of fund structures. I will pause there, Anjali. I know you had 2 or 3 questions, and
I will come back on this. Thank you, Rajat. I will come back on this, on how to expand the pool of domestic capital and get other classes of investors involved, both on the retail side, but also institutional side, insurance, pension funds, and so on. And having capital for a lot of the underrepresented sectors, which are hard. So biotech, green manufacturing, precision engineering, and so on and so forth. Dr. Kamble, turning to you, I think you represent a very, very important aspect of this discussion, how to take entrepreneurship down to absolutely the grassroots level. Women, SCST, underrepresented states, underrepresented districts. What can be done to make both capital as well as capacity more easily accessible to them? How should we think about eligibility criteria, for example, to make it accessible across industries, but equally on the side of the capital providers, make that interface much more user-friendly? So over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. आज का जो हमारा डिस्कशन का जो पॉइंट है, 2-3 पॉइंट्स के ऊपर हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं, तो जिसमें हम लोग लगभग 2015 से भारत सरकार के साथ बिल्कुल क्लोजली काम कर रहे हैं, और जिसमें मैं तो ये कहता हूं कि जो हमारे देश में जो कोलैटरल बेस्ड लीगेसी जो फंडिंग था, तो उसको कहीं ना कहीं वो ब्रेक लगा इन 2014-15 में, जब मोदी गवर्नमेंट केम इनटू पावर. जो मुद्रा स्कीम जो लॉन्च की गई, तो जिस मुद्रा स्कीम में देयर वर 45 करोड़ आर द बेनिफिशियरी, नॉट बेनिफिशियरी वर्ड मैं वो यूज नहीं करता हूँ, बारोवर्स. देयर आर 45 करोड़ बारोवर्स अंडर मुद्रा स्कीम, एंड 27 लाख करोड़ का लेंडिंग लगभग हमारे देश में इस मुद्रा स्कीम को हुआ है, जिसको मैं कहता हूँ कि इट्स बिगेस्ट एवर फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन स्कीम इन द वर्ल्ड. ओके, जो इतने बारोवर्स उसमें है, तो और ये विदाउट कोलैटरल, ये फर्स्ट टाइम हमारे देश में बैंकिंग सेक्टर में हुआ है. तो इससे जो है, और उसमें 60-70% आर वुमन, रूरल में, अर्बन, सब जगह पे जो है ये उसका लाभ मिला है. दूसरी जो बात है वो स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम 2016 में लॉन्च हो गई, और उसमें अभी देखिए तो मुद्रा में तो 50,000 से लेके 10 लाख का सपोर्ट था. स्टैंड अप इंडिया में लगभग अभी 2 लाख के अराउंड अकाउंट्स को सपोर्ट हुआ है. जो फर्स्ट मोदी गवर्नमेंट 1.0 एंड 2.0 में यह जो स्कीम रन हुई, तो उसका लाभ भी अनुसूचित जाति, जनजाति और महिलाएं, इनको उसमें हुआ है. तो और थर्ड वन इज मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस, जो है उन्होंने 2015-16 में ही एक वेंचर कैपिटल फंड लॉन्च किया. तो क्या हुआ, एज अ डिक्की, एज अ चेंबर, एंड आई एम एन एंटरप्रेन्योर, So we launched our venture capital fund in 2013, Picky SME fund. और उसको हमने ये कहा कि इट्स अ सोशल इम्पैक्ट फंड विच विल इन्वेस्ट इनटू द मार्जिनलाइज. तब रिस्पांस नहीं मिला, बट सिडबी ने उसमें 10,000 करोड़ का, सॉरी 10 करोड़ का इन्वेस्टमेंट का उन्होंने एक एश्योरेंस दिया था, मगर वो बना नहीं. मगर भारत सरकार ने ही वो फंड बनाया. मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस के 2 फंड चलते हैं. One is a fund for a scheduled caste and one fund is a for a backward classes. So these 2 funds. And अभी last year scheduled tribe के लिए भी एक फंड लॉन्च हुआ है. और ये तीनों फंड जो हमारा इंडस्ट्रियल फाइनेंस IFCI जो है उनका वेंचर कैपिटल फंड आर्म है, वो उसको चलाता है. तो यह लगभग 50,000 से लेके 15 करोड़ तक का लिमिट है ये सी वेंचर फंड में टू गेट एक्सेस टू द इक्विटी मार्केट, कैपिटल मार्केट जिसको हम बोलेंगे, जो इसके पहले कभी नहीं था, वह बन के आया हुआ है. और अभी रिसेंटली जो स्कीम लॉन्च की है बजट में, उसका हम स्वागत करते हैं. और वो स्कीम में लिखा है, अब आप अगर फाइन प्रिंट पढ़ेंगे तो वुमन कॉमा शेड्यूल कास्ट एंड शेड्यूल ट्राइब. तो मैं इसको देखिए, हम तो जो फर्स्ट स्टैंड अप इंडिया जो स्कीम थी उसको शुरू से उसकी डिजाइनिंग में, उसके इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में सिडबी एंड डिक्की वेर द 2 नेशनल लेवल हैंड होल्डिंग एजेंसी. सो वी हैव रीच अक्रॉस ऑल ओवर इंडिया डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स. और जो कम्युनिटी को हम टारगेट कर रहे हैं, बीइंग आई एम इन 35 इयर्स इन बिजनेस, तो यह जो समुदाय है, उस समुदाय के ग्रास रूट लेवल के जो भी चीजें हैं उसको बहुत बारीकी से हम लोग समझते हैं. तो वी असिस्टेड DFS उसमें बहुत सारी चीजों में, हाउ टू रोल आउट, कैसे रीच आउट करे. तो ये है. तो यह एक मुझे लगता है कि भारत सरकार ने सोशल और फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन, पर्टिकुलरली these marginalized section, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes के लिए एक फाइनेंशियल इकोसिस्टम जिसको हम कहते हैं वो बनाई है, जो 50,000 से लेके 15 करोड़ तक का एक सपोर्ट सिस्टम आज भारत में, एक इंस्टीट्यूशनल सपोर्ट सिस्टम उसमें अवेलेबल है.
Thank you, Dr. Kamlesh. Ranjit, I'm going to go back and to all our speakers today. And सबने बहुत अच्छा बैकग्राउंड, कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेटिंग एंड बहुत कुछ विचार शेयर किए हैं. So now going back to specific recommendations. So I will start in the same order, starting with Mr. Rao and Hitesh. Tell us, what would you have specific recommendations on how to make the MSME credit card scheme, credit access for startups, as well as for our underrepresented segments, women, SC, ST, Tier 2, Tier 3, and in particular, aligned with national priorities. We heard the Honorable Prime Minister, we've also seen what came out of the budget, the need to support, and this is a national requirement now, the need to support new areas, green manufacturing, new energy, new materials, biotech, agriculture, food processing. What can be done to make this very, very effective? So very quickly, Mr. Rao, Hitesh, and then I will go to the others.
Madam, just only 2 points just I would like to highlight. One is, see, to ensure the success at the bottom of the MSME pyramid, what is required is the existing infrastructure that is available in the banking outreach has to be complemented through the collaborations and partnerships. That is only one way of reaching out to the bottom of the pyramid of the MSME, where you have the NBFCs, you have the fintechs, and now luckily we have the technology platforms that are available. Alternate digital footprints are available for the evaluation. It is only the last mile connectivity what is required. For the acceleration, we have to have partnerships and collaborations. That is the mantra, that is the only thing for the success what we have to follow. And as far as all the other things will follow, capital, capacity building, that's not a big issue. This is only the way how to develop the bottom of the pyramid with the partnerships and collaborations.
Often MSMEs, and we hear this all the time from MSMEs and from startups as well, the need for the requirement rather to furnish collateral. How to get past that without impacting credit quality, of course, and to make it available, maybe are there new products required? So term loans, working capital loans, revenue-based financing, perhaps. So over to you, Mr. Rao or Hitesh, if you would like to comment.
Yeah, just only one thing on this aspect. This I would like to compliment. That's what I told. The traditional way of assessment is already a pass by. It's a history now. All the banks are following the alternative credit assessment models. We have a lot of surrogacy methods how to evaluate the assessment. So it's not that providing the credit is not a big issue. That's what I'm saying is only the last mile connectivity that is required, and also little bit of hand holding in the monitoring part, whether it is the cash flow monitoring and marketing part. That is only the thing. This is limited submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Last mile connectivity, how to get that pipe to connect?
Yeah, so I think one of the important aspect here is also that lenders can create a pre-approved database of eligible MSMEs, and this can be done without asking much of the documents or much of the data from the MSME themselves, but relying on independent data sources, like as I mentioned earlier, whether it is GSTN data, whether it is data fetched through account aggregation framework or GEM databases. Combining this data, pre-approved limits can be assigned to the eligible MSMEs. And then this pre-approved database of limits for eligible MSMEs can be integrated and embedded on various platforms like Udyam platform is there, or ONDC platform, or various other platforms where MSMEs can easily avail the credit while they are on those platforms. The other aspect could be
Did we lose Hitesh briefly, I think? We will wait for him to come back. I think we'll come back to Hitesh. We'll move to the next set of recommendations. And let me put out a few things and then just go around the table here. First is, how should we now, in this next second round of government funding through the FFS at SIDBI, through the other programs that Rajat mentioned, and that we've all had some exposure to, the SRI program, NIF, and so on, make it more effective and more accessible. If the last cycle was around digitization and a lot of the fintech, e-commerce, and so on, how do we make the next cycle accessible to those segments that have not yet seen and have the massive potential to drive India's growth through innovation? Which is, again, I go back to the green manufacturing, precision engineering, drone technologies, energy, new chemistry, new materials, agriculture, so food systems. How do we make that more accessible? Is there something different that is required in the design of the fund of funds, or potentially differential return expectations? How do we take the capital down to the last tier, the tier 2, tier 3, the underrepresented states, the Northeast, and particularly women entrepreneurs, SC/STs, and also make it potentially accessible to MSMEs. Sanjeev had mentioned, today's entrepreneurship, if I go back even 20 years, 20 years ago, nobody wanted to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wanted a job. Today, entrepreneurs are creating jobs. So it is less about graduating from college or MBA and so on, or engineering and going to get a job. Today, they're saying, I will build a company, I will generate jobs. But how to take that down to the new segments aligned with national priorities and across the whole of India, as Honorable PM said, the whole of government, the whole of India. Make it very, very inclusive. Arvindji, if I can start with you.
So
what can be done differently?
A couple of things. Number one, this is the way you have to congratulate the government. The way even the funds are. Sanjeev, you have starlets like Sanjeev are part of the fund of fund investment committee. We have currently I am part of the investment committee. there are fund managers, there are industry experts in this, which work along with the SIDBI team, along with the government to make this happen. So what does it show? There is clearly two things: alignment of national priorities, and these national priorities have to change. In a fund life of 8 to 10 years, we have to change our national priority as we go along. And that constantly keeps happening. So that is, to me, a given, and that has been built in the design of the scheme the way it is done. So that's number one. Two, I want to comment on a few things. Number one, it's a matter of great pride that today the gold standard for AIFs, which becomes the signaling for other domestic and international institutions and funds and family offices, has become one of them is SIDBI's approval, and with that gold standard lies a lot of responsibility. But to add to what Mr. Sanjeev Bikhchandani said, I'll tell you that SIDBI's fund of fund itself is doing two things. First of all, giving very good returns, much higher than any other asset class right now. And globally, we have benchmarked it with other similar national fund of funds. We are outperforming most of them. Two, we are already using Sanjeev's suggestion of taking the DPI and redeploying it. So that is already being done, and that will continue to happen. So if you really ask me, this is a if you keep doing it correctly, this has a lot of potential going forward. So DPI coming back, what is DPI is the distribution. Basically, when money comes back to the SIDBI, it's also being redeployed. So just for everybody's understanding. Two, I believe that, and what you said, Anjali ji, is very important. We need to create larger corpuses. Many other institutions want to invest. They don't have the capacity, the similar capacity that we have built in the government. So states realize that, they've come forward. Now, there could be many other institutions, insurance companies, banks, which may either regulatory wise or capacity wise not be able to invest in these funds directly. But SIDBI FFS provides a mechanism for them to co-invest. And that is something that we need to think about how we can enable that. Three, I think we have to, and this is something you also said, we have to maybe create buckets where in the FFS 2.0, which will have funds from the first fund as well as the new fund that the government has announced, to differentiate returns in different priority areas, and make it more long term. Three, since the appetite of the industry has also gone up. I mean, what was usually an average fund of about 200 crores, 250 crores. Today, the average, if you ask me, even the first-time fund managers are making 500 and 600 crores. And so aspirations have increased. So for that, we need to have the ability to invest a lot more money. And I think that is something that we need to look at. And having higher threshold of the limits. There are some regulatory boundaries that we have to.
I mean, just to clarify, the threshold of limit is how much percentage of the fund can be contributed by, say, one FFS, but we should have multiple fund of funds. One.
So there is
how do you think about longer gestation underlying assets?
So the thing is that there is a current threshold. Not only the one fund does not have a threshold. It's an internal risk matrix that funds do, but overall 35% of a fund cannot be coming out from government balance sheet. So that is the larger limit that is there, and we'll need to see what provisions we need to do to even extend that if possible. And if co-investment becomes a vehicle, then that 35% can be can be handled well.
Actually, Sanjeev here. May I interject here? Just for one point, if I may make?
Please.
Go ahead, Sanjeev.
Thank you. No. See, it's like this. मान लो 5 fund of funds हैं, सारे सरकारी हैं, ठीक है? And if 5 of them come together and give 80% of a fund, right? That may carry risk with it. You see, one of the things that we did at SIDBI in the earlier investment committees, we would sanction fairly liberally, knowing fully well कि 80% private sources से आएगा उस fund में, and there will be multiple eyes on that fund and fund manager doing diligence. So अगर कोई problematic है case, so he will not be able to close this fund, and that reduced the risk for SIDBI also. तो there has to be an overall limit also in a fund जो सरकारी पैसा कितना होना चाहिए in my view fund of funds का.
हाँ वो अभी 35% है संजीव, और उसको कई बार इंडस्ट्री से ही डिमांड आती है कि उसको 35 की जगह 40 कर दिया जाए. ऑफ कोर्स इट्स नेवर गोइंग टू बिकम एज हाई एज 80%, इट डिफीट्स द पर्पस, बट कई बार इंडस्ट्री से डिमांड आती है कि उसको 35 पे हार्ड कोड ना करके उसको 40% तक लिबरलाइज किया जाए. So just to answer that,
so I think that is one point. Please continue.
और उसके अंदर the other thing that is there is, I think we have to, as we see, and the Prime Minister said, India is now the North Star in this VUCA world, in this world where there is so much of uncertainty. पूरा दुनिया एक हिला हुआ है. उसके अंदर there's a lot of capital that is coming to India, and again we have to find good mechanisms via SIDBI, GIFT, and other things in this 2.0. And this is just not the fund of fund, but overall we'll have to think about how do we pull in international capital, which also wants to ride at the back of the success of the SIDBI fund of fund scheme. So, and the last point I do want to make is very important. Again, as I said, the fund sizes have grown. We need to think about secondary high growth funds. We have, and to build upon what Sanjeev also said, manage risk, but maybe be a little bit more liberal from the overall 35% limit, maybe just extend it to 40%. So those would be some of the things that I would think that we should be doing in the fund 2.0, and also overall nationally, which is something that we have to look at. Anjali ji, last thing, if I leave this on this round, will be that many times we see this codification. The fund managers also need to think about national priorities. They also need to think that how much of their capital they need to also allocate. So when we allocate, we of course tell them they have to invest 2x in this and that, but they'll also have to start thinking. The industry will have to also start thinking that they also have to geographically spread themselves, align themselves with national priorities. So that is also a requirement that the industry will have to enable themselves to participate better in the growth of India and make it Viksit Bharat. Thank you.
No, well said, Arvindji. This will be a partnership between industry, government, as well as what the regulator suggests we do. Increasingly, I see fund managers actually reflecting the reality of the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we have a number of participants also waiting to speak, so I will go quick in the next round. But founders that want to build for hard sectors, that will have slightly longer gestation, that may not have a hockey stick, that may come from tier 2, tier 3. Often the worry is, where will my next round of funding come from? Will I get enough capital? So there is a chicken and egg. I think the availability of capital, as we have seen with the FFS, has actually created an industry now, and more of that to come. Rajat, very quickly, I'm going to ask you to comment on what you are seeing in industry, in this partnership between industry and our government in India, our very enlightened policies, but also global capital. How do we make this 10x, 100x in terms of capital availability, with, of course, all the right guardrails, and particularly get more Indian domestic institutions to participate? I think we have seen the unlocking of the HNIs, but how do we get domestic institutions?
Certainly, and I think I'll quickly try and say, Anjali, probably 2 or 3 points. See, firstly is domestic pride. There's a domestic capital here, but pride we have, so that we have to do सबको साथ लेके चलना है, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, and सबके साथ चलना है, which means every asset class should be participating in this. Today, this is, no longer that risky. It's more of a developmental capital formation, which we have to look at, not only for the startups, which require equity as well as credit and debt, but also for the scale-ups, where, Arvindji's mentioned about secondaries, so that we do not lose out on our startups, which we've already been invested in. Also, the need of the hour is to look at the sunrise sector. And that is where the government support is very critical. Whether we are forming these multiple fund-of-fund structures where there is a participation from the government, from the pension funds, the insurance funds, as well as the government having a look at saying, look, can they reduce their return by capping at a risk-free rate, which is lower? I mean, there should be a first loss guarantee. Some of these ideas, a differential waterfall, as we call, can be put together. And importantly, what we need to look at it is the regulatory framework, simplification for ease of doing business. As Arvindji mentioned, that we need both international and domestic capital. Taxation, clarity, and consistency are keys which can structure this. And as fund managers, we have to make India as the fund management capital of the world. That means not only we should be investing here, but we can invest outside. If they can invest into India, why can't we invest outside? So I'll stop there.
Many, many good points. I have been given the task, as you all know, of compiling all of these recommendations. So all of this we will make sure that we incorporate. Dr. Kamble, you have the last word.
Anjali, sorry, I have a couple of comments, if I may.
Yes, please do. And then I do want to close this round with Dr. Kamble then, and then open it up to participants.
Yeah, so a couple of points. You see, national priorities are great, but the moment you have private sector participation of people in VC funds where they want a return, you got to figure out, what national priority will give what kind of financial return and how best to do it. And that's an open question. It's not resolved yet. Number one. Number two is, you see, we are talking about not just venture capital. We're talking about getting risk capital to startups. Venture capital is one means, right? And is one framework. But there's a lot of money lying in corporate balance sheets. Corporates typically don't invest in startups. They don't even invest in VC funds. Okay. And one big reason why corporates don't invest in startups is because of this whole issue of it's complicated for a private company or a private limited or even a public listed company to invest in startups because there are all sorts of government regulations. Now, I remember that InfoEdge, where I work, was investing from its balance sheet for the first 12 years, from 2007 to 2019. And then we became victims of our own success where, because Zomato and Policybazaar succeeded and they were from our balance sheet, we were in grave danger of being classified as an NBFC. Right. So somewhere there need to be some sort of regulatory change. I do not know what exactly, which unlocks the capital in corporate balance sheet and gets them to be able to invest in startups. That is beyond the fund of funds limit, but that is something which should be done.
Actually, recently there's also been a new framework for corporates to actually set up incubators, and a number of them have actually done MOUs with DPIIT and so on. And corporates, Indian R&D spend is about 0.7% of GDP. We all know that needs to increase. And one way of supporting some of the new sunrise sectors is through corporate R&D, where it's a win-win. So they get a pipeline of innovation, and our innovators get access to not just capital, but to test bed and pilot and POC. I think that is also equally important, but a different conversation. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Kamble.
Yeah.
How do we make this work? What are the three things you would tell us?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. For a first, for credit cards to the 5 lakh rupees to the 10 lakh micro entrepreneurs, तो उसका distribution of a credit card जो है, ये जो 10 lakh entrepreneurs जो है, we have to identify from across all over India, then from rural, urban, women and SC/ST need to be given the priority for the distribution of these 10 lakh credit cards to the micro entrepreneurs. And the other suggestion in this is that the turnover limit should be 50 lakh rupees. Now, as of now, there is a micro entrepreneurs limit is a very high. और उनके लिए तो ये 5 लाख रुपए का कुछ इतना ये नहीं रहेगा, तो 50 लाख तक का जो टर्नओवर है जिस माइक्रो एंटरप्रेन्योर्स का मैक्स, तो उनको ये क्रेडिट कार्ड देने चाहिए. दिस इज वन. दूसरा, जैसे अभी मैंने कहा कि जो फंड ऑफ फंड है और जो स्टार्टअप्स को सपोर्ट कर रहा है, तो इसमें जो 2-3 फंड मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सोशल जस्टिस ने जो बनाए हैं और ट्राइबल ने, तो ये भी एक सोशल इम्पैक्ट फंड है. दे आर supporting to the backward communities, scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So from these fund of funds, some contribution जो है इसको इस फंड को भी सपोर्ट मिलना चाहिए. This is my one submission to the ministry. And third part is Stand Up India. I have a list of suggestions because I worked 10 years for implementing this Stand Up India, but फिर भी जो मैं जो रीड कर रहा हूँ ना ये स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम को, और उस सेंटेंसेस में भी लिखा हुआ है कि जो एक सक्सेसफुल जो स्कीम रही स्टैंड अप इंडिया, उससे यह स्कीम बनाई है। तो फर्स्ट स्कीम वाज टू सपोर्टिंग, उसमें जो वर्डिंग था तो ग्रीन एंटरप्रेन्योर्स, जो हम फर्स्ट टाइम ही बोलते हैं, तो अभी वो एग्जैक्टली फर्स्ट टाइम एंटरप्रेन्योर्स का वर्ड आया है। और लास्ट टाइम 2.5 लाख का टारगेट था, 1,25,000 वुमन एंटरप्रेन्योर्स इन जनरल और 1,25,000 एंटरप्रेन्योर्स अमंग शेड्यूल कास्ट एंड शेड्यूल ट्राइब। अभी इसको अभी डबल किया है और वर्डिंग इज सेम, दिस स्कीम इज सपोर्टिंग वुमन कॉमा SC ST एंटरप्रेन्योर्स। तो अगर ये 5 लाख जो है उसमें 2.5 लाख फ्रॉम वुमन इन जनरल कैटेगरी, और फर्स्ट स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम इज वेरी सक्सेसफुल फॉर वुमन इन जनरल कैटेगरी, ऑल जो है वो रहा है, तो वो 2.5 लाख वुमन एंड 2.5 लाख SC ST, 5 साल का इसका टारगेट रखा है। इट्स अ गुड इनफ, बट द रिपोर्टिंग शुड बी इन अ 2 बकेट। ये इसको बहुत स्ट्रिक्टली देखना चाहिए कि यस, जो भी सरकार को रिपोर्ट कर रही है, बैंक रिपोर्ट कर रही है, कोई भी रिपोर्ट कर रहा है कि यस वुमन इन जनरल के इतने अकाउंट्स है और SC ST के इतने अकाउंट्स है, तो वो बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है ऐसे मुझे लगता है। जो रेटिंग है, अभी ये फर्स्ट टाइम एंटरप्रेन्योर्स जो है वो रेटिंग, उनका क्या रेटिंग होगा? सो दिस रेटिंग नीड टू बी वेव्ड ऑफ, उसको वेव करना चाहिए। दूसरा, मुझे थोड़ा ये फर्स्ट टाइम एंटरप्रेन्योर्स है तो रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट और बाकी सब चीजें ऐड ऑन होके जो जाती है, तो उसके बारे में तो हमने DFS को पहले भी लिखा हुआ है, मगर उसके ऊपर थोड़ा ध्यान देना चाहिए। तो ऐसे बहुत सारे हैं। दूसरा, जो ऑफिशियल्स है हमारे, बैंक ऑफिशियल्स, क्रेडिट ऑफिशियल्स जो है, स्टेक होल्डर्स जो है, सेंसिटाइजेशन प्रोग्राम्स इसमें होने चाहिए ऐसे मुझे लगता है, ताकि इसका सक्सेस और रीच आउट जल्दी हो जाएगा, ऐसे मुझे लगता है। तो ये कुछ सजेशंस है, फिर भी बस मीटिंग के लिए आज के लिए, मगर काफी जो हमारे सजेशंस हैं ऑफलाइन विल गिव टू द DFS। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
मिलिंद जी, थैंक यू। ये सब हमने नोट किए हैं and I will incorporate into our recommendations. Thank you. We have a number of participants who have joined us today, and I will invite, please raise your hand and introduce yourself and give your commentary, please.
Yeah, this is.
I can start with one of the founders, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I know we have a number of entrepreneurs as well today. So who would like to start? I see Kajal raising her hand. Okay, please start, Kajal. Introduce yourself and start.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm regards to all the panelists. I'm Kajal Shah. I'm co-founder of Dreamfly Innovations, and we are into battery space for drones and aerospace industry. My suggestion is on Para 31 Fund of Funds for Startups for sectors like drones and aerospace, where technology is a national priority. We must strengthen the local component ecosystem through innovation and investment. Developing critical technology component is expensive and manufacturing requires significant capital. Therefore, we need dedicated development funds for deep tech startups, cheaper operating capital through low interest financing, tax relief on technology products, and rationalized taxation on component manufacturing to boost innovation, helping staying companies like us cost competitive with global players and also establishing leader in drone and aerospace technology. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Kajal. I'm going to invite the other two entrepreneurs who are also there today to please make their points and then request the panel to respond if there are any responses, suggestions to them. I saw Bharat's hand up as well. So Bharat, would you go next, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Anjali, and thanks so much for the engaging discussion from all the elite panelists. I'm Bharat. I'm the founder of Fix44. We are a biotech startup working on creating sustainable and affordable alternative or smart proteins for human consumption. We use AI and biotechnology. Honored to be a part of this forum and get an opportunity to share suggestions, if I may. On Para 30, credit cards for micro enterprises. Appropriate safeguards, I believe, would need to be put in place to prevent any potential misuse of the credit limit, while continuing to maintain ease of access for genuine beneficiaries. That is a humble submission. On para 31, there is a mention of expanding the fund of funds for startups with an additional 10,000 crores, which is great. Given the earlier funds deployment, I'm sure that there are a lot of key lessons learned in identifying what are the potential bottlenecks, especially when we expanded the scope. We should be looking at what bottlenecks were there and address them so that capital flow to startups is better than what it was through the earlier. Lastly, on para 32, scheme for first-time women and SC entrepreneurs, I believe that there should be concrete steps planned to ensure long-term sustainability, not just initial, but long-term sustainability via mentorship networks, via market access programs, etc. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. And is there somebody? I see Arpit here as well. Arpit, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Arpit. I am founder and CEO of Dharaksha Eco Solutions. We are a biotech company building next generation of materials that can replace the petroleum-driven products. I have one suggestion and one question. So suggestion is, particularly, talking about fund of funds, I am a direct beneficiary. So I can vouch that 10 years ago, it used to be 5 times more difficult of raising funds as it is today because the capital has come on ground. So on ground validation from my side. It's far easier to raise angel rounds. But there comes the suggestion that, as Arvind sir mentioned, that Fund of Funds has invested in 141 fund managers. The access to that information is still privileged. There is no one place where we can, have access to all the AIFs. What are their target areas, what is the contact person, how can we get the meeting, etc. And many a times the first time founders have to engage with an investment banker for the same purpose, just to get the meetings, and investment banker ends up charging 3 to 4% of the fundraise, which I believe should not happen for at least the first time founders of at least the first 2 fundraisers. So a unified portal with this information, that what are the AIFs, what are their specific categories, what is the fund size, what is the point of contact, etc., would help the startups a lot, accelerate getting the meetings in, right talent gets to the right place. The question that I have is that in this new scheme, we've also come up with a provision of loans up to 2 crores to the first time founders. Now, this scheme is essentially very similar to CGTMSE scheme. And the core problems would remain the same. That is, bank as institutions cannot underwrite just based on business models without collateral. It's a very risky proposition. So we would face the same problems here. Now, we just heard from sir that they've changed the mode of evaluation to cash flow based assessment. Now that is fairly good when we are going for top up from, let's say, getting 50 lakhs approved to up to 2 crores. But for the first time entrepreneurs, it would still be a challenge. How would they show cash flows in order to get this loan approved? So what are we thinking of? What are our learnings from CGTMSE scheme, and how would we implement this better this time?
Thank you, Arpit. I will just go around, participants get all the questions, comments, and then perhaps the panel can respond holistically. Next, and Arpit, you made a very important point around for the first time entrepreneur, what is that first unlock? So very fittingly, I see there's someone here from Axis Bank, I saw Vijay, and I also see someone from SBI. If you could give your comments and recommendations or questions for how to make this more effective.
So this is Vijay from Axis Bank. My point on the credit card for micro enterprises. Like the government has come up with the ECLGS scheme, and it was a big success, and we were able to survive in the very difficult time. In the micro also, as a bank has large customer, we already funded, and we should have a scheme like that where we can pre-approved model with a government guarantee and the concession rate, so that we can cater to the larger segment there. Second, for somebody is not having a credit limit, we need to have a digital onboarding and integration with Udyam and the aggregator. If you're able to do that, Udyam platform, that will give edge for the customer to take it on a faster track. These are the 2 suggestions from our side.
Thank you, Vijay. Is there somebody I saw from SBI? If they would like to comment on particularly this question of how can there be unlock for first-time entrepreneurs as well as for women and SCSTs? If not, then can I turn to now the AIF industry is also well represented here by one of our veteran fund managers. Vineet, over to you. Comments, please, and suggestions.
Lovely to hear everyone. Of course, the budget has been wonderful. I have 2-3 comments very specifically on how to look at industry 2.0, especially AIF 2.0 from there, the FFS 2.0 in some sense. First is, if we are looking at national priorities, maybe we should think about creating a blended finance approach, which is essentially trying to create a subordination in case the funds that are investing towards national priorities. This will answer the question that Sanjeev had raised as to how do you actually deal with the national priorities with private capital. And this is one of the best ways to do it, where the fund of fund can take a subordinated position, at least taking, not just reducing the return expectation. In my view, return expectation should not be changed, but risk participation should be enhanced. That would actually be one. The second one is FFS 1.0 did a wonderful job in building the early stage ecosystem. I think what we are challenged with is between 50 crore and 150 crore, where I think is what you call the big new challenge that emerged, especially for startups. And this is where you need 1,000 crore to 3,000 crore funds. And those funds need to actually get significant amount of support from the fund of funds system. I think the third point that I just wanted to present is that there is, and I represent impact funds, those funds which are actually focusing on low income areas, those who are trying to, VC industry by nature is very meritocratic. If you want to democratize and create jobs and livelihood where people live, those kinds of funds need to be actually considered as part of national priorities. So not just technology, defense, etc., which are sunrise sectors, but how do you actually create entrepreneurs who are operating? How do you support entrepreneurs who are operating in difficult circumstances? So these are 3 pointers for the FFS fund, especially the 2.0.
Thank you. And Vineet, only FFS or other fund of fund schemes and potentially credit schemes as well, right? Because the areas that we are talking about, whether it's agriculture or manufacturing, often the need is not just equity, but also debt.
Yeah, so I think the 2 crore one, Arpit actually highlighted the challenge which remains, may not necessarily be relevant for somebody who doesn't have a business at all, or just in the business idea stage. You will have some level of operations, but those are great ideas to actually support very marginalized society. On the credit card thing, I think one of the challenges that all the participants who will be distributing the credit card will have to think about. By nature, most of the 140,000 entrepreneurs are located in certain geographies. And if you want to actually disperse these credit cards to slightly more, make it slightly more competitive, take them to those who actually need it, you might have to have NBFCs, fintechs, banks, both private and public sector cooperate and partner. So that, and also keep an eye on whether the distribution is 80% in cities, or is it actually going to where very young emerging entrepreneurs who probably will benefit from that 5 lakh limit decide.
Yeah. Mithul, you get the last word.
Thanks. Thank you, Anjali. I think just 2-3 points. I think on the first one around the credit card for micro enterprises, so I think it's a good initiative. I think the one suggestion there is maybe for better implementation, if we could consider lower interest periods or flexible repayment options, I feel that may work well for at least the sector that we're targeting. On the second point, Para 31, which is the fund of fund, I think we've had a very successful FF1 deployment. We've also been beneficiaries of that. And we're hoping to kind of see how the DPI accumulates to further FOFs for everyone in the industry. But the 2 suggestions there is, one, there is a certain specific focus mentioned on the deep tech side and service delivery startups. I think there are 2 other areas which are doing significantly well for India. One is the whole clean tech, green investment space, and the second is the whole India consumer story, because there's a significant contribution that consumption has to our GDP. So if those can also be supported in kind of getting them better and better, that would go a long way. The second point is, there are global sovereign funds that have interest in India now. India is a big strategy for everyone. So for ensuring FOF2 has, maximized their benefits and participation with these funds, I would suggest terms, pace, etc., be at par with these global sovereign funds, because that goes a long way in giving confidence to fund managers. Right. The last one, I think, the one learning that I kind of came across from the Stand Up India scheme is that non-digital does not work very well from an implementation perspective. So for Para 32, if we can try and make it digital first and link it to, we have Aadhaar and Jan Dhan as the benefits in implementation. If we can use that, I think it will go a long way. These are just a few suggestions.
Thank you all very much. I'm just going to see if I see Dr. Kamble has his hand up. Over to you.
आपने जो पहले कहा था कि फर्स्ट टाइमर का डेफिनेशन क्या होगा, तो जैसे स्टैंड अप इंडिया में फर्स्ट टाइमर यानी ग्रीन फील्ड एंटरप्राइज का डेफिनेशन ये था कि उन्होंने 1 साल पहले बिजनेस शुरू किया होना चाहिए। मुझे अभी ये स्पेसिफिक सजेशन ये है कि जो स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम जो फर्स्ट से चलते आ रही है, इट वाज आल्सो फॉर अ ग्रीन फील्ड एंटरप्राइजेस, और उसमें बहुत सारे सक्सेस स्टोरीज है, तो उनको भी इस स्कीम में 2 करोड़ तक का जो इसमें फंडिंग का जो प्रावधान है, तो उसमें उसका बेनिफिट उनको मिलना चाहिए, क्योंकि वो भी फर्स्ट टाइमर ग्रीनफील्ड ही बिजनेसेस इसका लोन लेके उन्होंने शुरू किया हुआ था, तो उसमें इसका बेनिफिट उसको मिलना चाहिए। दूसरा, मुझे जो फंड ऑफ फंड जो बैठे हैं, मैं भी एक फंड ऑफ फंड का ओनर था कभी एक जमाने में, तो और आज जो अलग अलग सेक्टर में हम लोग सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, मगर प्रोडक्ट बेस्ड जो स्टार्टअप्स है, जो प्रोडक्ट बेस्ड स्टार्टअप्स जो है, उनको भी प्रायोरिटी जो है इसमें देनी चाहिए। एआई डिजिटल ये सब है, उसको तो होना चाहिए, मगर जो प्रोडक्ट बेस्ड जो है, जो एक्चुअल ही विल सेट अप समथिंग फैक्ट्री प्रोडक्ट्स, उसको ये करना चाहिए ऐसे मुझे लगता है। थैंक यू।
Thank you. I see Mr. Paul is here from SBI. Paul, would you like to give your quick comments? Because I think I didn't see you in the last round.
Yeah, in fact, I was going through all the, whatever suggestions all the members made. I hope I am audible.
Yeah.
Yes, please go
ahead. So I'll just draw upon something that the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned. He mentioned something about trades. So I just want to just give my feedback over trades. I know it is, we are speaking about startups and fund of funds and everything. See, one of the major pain points apart from the credit delivery part is the delayed receivables, which trades sort of, solves to a large extent. What we are feeling is that if the government institutions come into the fray, and also the government makes it mandatory not only for the registration part, but also to be active in the trades platform. So just to give you a oversight, see in 23-24, the total put through business was somewhere around 72,000 crores. Now that increased substantially last year to 1,40,000 crores. This year we are already touching 2 trillion. So that is the power of trades. So if the government can think about this suggestion, making maybe 50% of the payments that you do through to the MSMEs to be routed through the trades platform. And believe me, that is one of the boons which MSME supplier can get. If his receivables are delayed even for 1 month, just imagine the interest costs that these small enterprises, especially the micro enterprises, will have to bear. So my suggestion, because all of them have given a lot of good suggestions regarding the startup, Stand Up India, fund of funds. So just thoda sa alag hatke, I just wanted to say something about trades.
Trades.
Thank you all very much. Any last comments from anybody? If not, I want to.
I just want to say again. I think it's very important to listen to the comments and suggestions that have come from the industry. They're all well-meaning. Not only industry, startups, and others have given some very good suggestions. I just want to assure Anjali ji through this webinar, all the valid suggestions that have come. I know there is a lot of thing and chat, but there's a lot of chat that is going on. But the suggestions that have come and are pointed have been noted, and whatever is actionable will be actioned. This much assurance I can give.
Thank you very much, Arvindji. And I also want to express gratitude to government, to all the various ministries, to Honorable Prime Minister for his continuing inspiration and enablement. And I think we all stand very proud as Indians when we think about the interface and today the integration across government, their policies, the support given to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and increasingly now the MSME, as also the product-led, production, manufacturing-led ecosystem that is developing. So we know that the next 10 years, just like the last 10 years, the next 10 years will open up new vistas for both growth and innovation here. And thank you very much to DFS, to DPIIT, to MSME. I think all the work that has gone behind the scenes to get the webinar going today, really, really appreciate it. And we'll come back in the afternoon with the compiled set of recommendations from this group. So thank you all so much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anjali.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.